Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Future-Proofing Facility Management with Digital Transformation. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by TMA Systems. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. Our speakers are on video today, and if you would like to view them along the top of your screen, look for the bar in your window to pull down so we are visible to you. Next, please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions via the question box at any time. There will be a Q&A portion after this presentation, so please type your questions there to send them to us. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send a message to us via the question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of your control panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the control panel, so please be sure the panel is expanded so you can access the question box. And if you are interested in continuing education credits, please note that you'll receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive after this webinar. You can report to your association for the credit. Now I'll introduce your speakers. John Rimmer, CFM, is president of FM360 LLC and has over 25 years of facility management experience in a variety of capabilities and industries. John and his team use their breadth of knowledge and diverse expertise to deliver comprehensive facility management consulting and related services to their clients, including CMMS implementation, improvement, and administration. Peter Strasdis is the Associate Vice President for Facilities Management at Western Michigan University, a department of nearly 400 employees that are responsible for planning, engineering, construction, and operations for a campus of 150 buildings and 8 million GSF. In his 43-year tenure at WMU, he has also held positions as the construction administrator, director of maintenance services, and assistant professor of construction management. He has served on the Michigan APA board for many years, including 6 years as president. He was actively involved with the International APA past president, served on their board for several years, and was president in 2015 to 2016. He was appointed by the governor to the Michigan OSHA Construction Commission, was a six-term mayor in the city of Portage, and served as the president of the Council of Governments in Kalamazoo County. Hello, gentlemen, and thank you for being with us here today. John, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Jen. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy day to walk with us here as we look at some of the challenges that, we as facility folks are dealing with today. I know our focus is kind of around the supply chain. And when you look at it, we've got this strained supply chain of the long lead times that we had, of course, even coming out of the Great Recession, that during COVID got worse. And now it's almost impossible, seemingly, to get the parts and inventory items that you need. And then, of course, we're battling inflation. So, unfortunately, these are all things that we don't have control over, but we're going to try to figure out how we can work around those challenges. In addition to the supply chain, we're also wrestling with another key resource, which is our people. You're coming out of COVID. They're calling this the Great Retirement, basically, with a number of our beloved baby boomers retiring and leaving the workforce. And the sad part is it's not over. It's only going to get ugly. We still have about 25% of our workforce that is still up for retirement between now and 2030. So it's going to get the pool is going to get shallower and shallower. And I know with many of you having open job recs, it's getting longer and longer to actually fill them. So between not getting the supplies that we need, not having the people to turn the wrenches and take care of our facility services, we are indeed having some significant challenges. On top of that, we have the good old backlog with our aging infrastructure that we've been trying to dig out of, and I think we've made some progress, but still many facility organizations deal with equipment and systems that are at or beyond useful life, which ultimately pushes us into reactive firefighting. So with not having enough people, not having enough material, and then, of course, we have to do all these Band-Aid fixes, if you will, on our equipment that is beyond useful life. It makes us, a bit full-on corrective. When we look at reactive firefighting, the corrective maintenance side of it, it's extremely inefficient when you have your technicians run around like chickens with their heads cut off, and it also is very costly. One of my Johnisms I like to use quite often is it cheaper to change the oil in your car or to not to? we all get that. The executive levels understand that, and yet when we look at how we operate our buildings, unfortunately, we run a lot more of the to not to. We just kind of go with the around to it philosophy on our PM strategy, for example. We do them when we can get around to them. So one of the big things that we have to do to help us overcome these challenges is, again, it paints a bleak picture of what we're wrestling with. But when you start assessing and evaluating a number of the different facility organizations, as I have over the years, what we realize is that, with all of that reactive maintenance, it is very inefficient. And while we have a strained labor pool, strained resources, we actually can use what we have far more efficiently and try to move the dial so that we get ahead of the curve. And that really is one of the key things that we need to do, is find ways to migrate our facility management programs from being reactive firefighters to, I'll say proactive, but getting up there where we're doing at least our preventive maintenance and migrating beyond that. So how do we get there? First, you've got to make sure you actually have your assets in a CMMS like TMA. You've got to get your preventive maintenance scheduled, and ideally you're using industry best practices. And then you've got to prioritize your PMs versus your corrective maintenance. And that quite often is the challenge, is that you usually run into the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And what we need to do is make sure that we're prioritizing accurately our corrective maintenance and our service request, and then juxtaposing those with the priority of our preventive maintenance, which really should be driven by the criticality of the assets, the systems, and of course the services that they support. The other part to that equation is, quite often your facility organizations do not capture their corrective maintenance, and that is absolutely critical. I'm actually one that if I can get 90% of my technicians' time against work orders, that's the goal. Even if I have some administrative work orders to capture time for training and meetings against it, but I need to be able to show where are we spending our resources, and then do that analysis after the fact coming out of the CMMS to find out where are we using our resources inefficiently or ineffectively, and then allow us to make those appropriate changes. With that, tracking one of the main KPIs, it's a very simple one to do, is just your PM to CM ratio. The number of work orders that are scheduled or preventive versus the number of reactive or corrective work orders. Sadly, still, even in 2022, we have more than half of our facility organizations are running more than 50% reactive. To me, I'm one that I try to be a little bit more gracious and set the PM to CM ratio at 80-20. So you're 80% scheduled, 20% reactive, unless you're in a critical environment, such as data centers, manufacturing, healthcare. Then I'm going to push it more towards 90-10, just because of the criticality of those facilities. But tracking that PM to CM ratio is pretty key, so that way you can slowly start moving your organization out of the firefighting mode and into something that's more manageable and more predictable. And that really is what we're trying to accomplish here. So, for example, as we move from that 50%, let's say 50% preventive, 50% reactive, and we start moving this where we're more on the plus side of that with respect to our scheduled maintenance, now we can forecast what parts we need. So we can associate parts with the actual PMs inside the CMMS, and then forecast and order the material. When we're reactive, we're now scrambling, running to the supply house or ordering through Grainger or whomever to get the parts that we need. And then of course we're going to have to overnight it or try to expedite it, which is going to cost more money. And then of course all that running around trying to find those parts that we need. It's just a lot of waste of time and energy, where we really should be, getting those, keeping our technicians out in the field, turning the wrenches. So ideally, getting the parts associated with your PMs, and then forecasting and ordering material. And then with our strained labor resources, the last thing I need for them to do is getting a whole lot of windshield time or running from point A to point B. I need to keep my technicians in the field turning wrenches. They should be able to take advantage of the mobile platforms that are available these days for CMMS systems, is where they can view and request parts via the mobile. So if they're troubleshooting, let's say, a package unit up on the roof, they're able to diagnose what the issue is, look up the parts associated with that asset, why they're still up on the roof, and check to see, do we have those items in the warehouse? If so, request them. If not, then let's order that part and get the our supply chain moving, or have our warehouse order that part for us. You can also even set up the system to where, depending on your relationship with your supply, your vendor, you can actually automatically order parts from them and initiate those. And then if I'm on the warehouse or the storeroom side of it, as we're receiving those items on a daily basis or throughout the day, let's receive the parts, bag them, tag them, and then you notify the technician that that item has shown up so they can actually complete the repair, and do the exact same thing for their PMs. And this to me, I've been working with customers, and back in the day I was even at Microsoft. So what we would do is have our PM scheduled, bag tag the parts, so the technician would show up, look in their bin, grab the parts they need, throw it in the van, and they're ready to roll for the day, so they can stay out there in the field. And then the other part of it too is I'm a big proponent for having a runner. So instead of having my technicians that are the higher pay rate going back and forth from that roof to fixing that package unit, to going back to the warehouse to see if we have the part or not. If not, they got to go to the supply house, to the vendor to try to get the part. Use a runner to do that. They're a lower pay rate, and keep your technicians out there turning those wrenches. That really is our end goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And then lastly, it's we've got to dig out of this deferred backlog. So we're trying to get ahead of this curve, and I can plan parts out as much as possible on my preventive maintenance, and I can try to keep my technicians in the field turning wrenches. But until I can dig out of this deferred maintenance backlog pit that we've put ourselves in over the years, we're going to continue to force us into that downward spiral of reactive firefighting. So you've got to make sure that you're doing your capital replacement forecasting, where you plan for a replacement. Essentially, you do your facility condition assessments. Typically, those are done by a third party about once every 3 to 5 years is the recommendation. And then I incorporate that FCA data into the CMMS, or they actually even have capital planning modules or software that can assist with that, but making sure that we're staying on top of that information, and then also do your facility condition assessments in-house on an annual basis, where basically you're doing a gut check. And you can set that up as an inspection, where if you go and you see what items are due in the next, say, 1 to 3 years for replacement, go and evaluate that and see, are they aging faster, or could you push them out a little bit more, just because we know we're wrestling over that dollar. But taking advantage of your CMMS to help you actually stay on top of the capital replacement forecasting. The other part of that too, and this is really where that facility condition index, which is another KPI that's heavily utilized in the industry, is that your FCI is that sum of deferred maintenance divided by the replacement value of the facility. So basically, it's once you do that facility condition assessment, you're identifying and quantifying all of the assets and equipment that are beyond useful life, and how much would it cost to actually bring them up to date. And once you have that number, that's what gives you the ratio of your FCI. And you want to basically trend and benchmark that, even if it's internally, so you can justify continued improvements in your facility and in your portfolio. Because what you want to do is try to get management to see that if they're not reinvesting, if they're not providing the necessary capital to refresh the equipment and systems, then they're going to see that FCI degrade. Basically, they'll see their facilities degrade and get worse. What I like doing is, we all know we've got that ugly duckling of a building, where we can say, okay, that's got a very high FCI, basically meaning that it's the ugly ratio of deferred maintenance. And if we can say, well, if we do not get that $4 million each year that we need to put back into our buildings, if you only give us, let's say, $2.5 million to put back into our facilities, what you're going to see is, our buildings are slowly going to become just like that ugly duckling. So we're going to have a whole lot of ugly ducklings. And so use that comparative analysis to help management to understand the cost of saying no. And of course, with this, to better utilize our resources, is leveraging technology. While again, this seems like a problem with our strained labor pool, I actually see this as a great opportunity for us to take advantage of technology that we have had at our fingertips that we just haven't utilized. Building control systems is a great example where, quite often we use our building control systems to help us identify, what are the biggest fires that we need to go out and fight. And really, we should be using those, yes, to monitor, when we exceed the operating limits. But how about we start incorporating some statistical analysis or some trends that allow us to be flagged, where we're not the ones that manually having to go do the assessment, but the system is thinking on our behalf, identifying when we start straying away from optimum, or if we start basically moving towards potential failure. We just don't leverage our building control systems to that extent, so we should take advantage of that. There's other third-party entities that have their own little black boxes, if you will, that will extract your building control information, and they run it through their own statistical analysis and failure analytics to help you predict failures and, again, try to get ahead of the curve. So we're using the technology to work smarter, not harder, because there's plenty of hard work to do already. Predictive maintenance is another great opportunity to incorporate technology. I know, vibration analysis has been around, for decades, with our Navy starting it way back when, but now it has advanced where you're able to have small, simple devices that you can use even just to monitor a red, yellow, green, or you can, of course, do your own analysis for vibration analysis. We've got infrared thermography. Those cameras have come down where they're relatively inexpensive, so that we're starting to gather data that tells us what's going on with our equipment, what is the condition of the equipment, because unfortunately, your preventive maintenance, while again, preventive maintenance is not a bad thing, where in the sense that it's scheduled or runtime based. So hey, every 3 months or 3,000 miles, I got to change the oil in my car. Well, do you have to? Does it need it? Well, I don't know. It's been 3 months or it's been 3,000 miles. Here, we actually start using the data we're getting from our building control system or data that we're getting from our predictive maintenance tools to help us identify what really is going on with our equipment, so we do the right maintenance at the right time. Because your preventive maintenance can be labor intensive, often requires downtime, and then, sadly, whenever I've done troubleshooting in the past, first thing I always ask is who did what to it last. Because quite often preventive maintenance, when we start putting our hands inside of equipment, we can actually introduce failure modes as well. So trying to migrate and evolve our maintenance programs will be pretty critical as well to help us get the most out of the technicians. And then the last is rounds and readings. This is a simple one where we still, we've got folks that, hey, yeah, we use our mobile technology to do work orders, but they still grab that clipboard when they're doing their rounds and readings. Let's move away from the paper and try to get our rounds and readings put directly into the mobile device for our CMMS. And we can set up alarm limits. We can basically create automatic follow-up work orders if we exceed alarm limits. And so that way, we're able to trend and track what is going on with our rounds and readings for our equipment and our central plants, et cetera. And not, I can't trend and I can't query paper. So again, trying to take advantage of technology to help us be more efficient, more effective with the resources that we do have. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete.
Again, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pete Strasdis, Associate Vice President of Facilities at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I want to thank everyone for attending today, as well as the opportunity to speak on something I'm very passionate about. And by the way, I've been here for 43 years at Western Michigan University, and I have one more week left. So when John was talking about the great retirement, I am one of them, okay? And but with that said, my topic today is kind of dovetail as more of a case situation for what John talked about. And while it is really focusing on preventive maintenance and our journey, it's bigger and broader than that. It really is that digital transformation that I'd like to share with the audience about what we went through over the past 30 some odd years, as well as trying to future-proof our campus with the facility management. And also add more context that my campus is about 8.2 million square feet. We are a cogen system campus, so I've got about 16 megawatts of power generation with about 400 team members, all the way from architects through custodians. Okay, so for the overview, I'll briefly talk about the history of our journey for preventive maintenance and our journey of dealing with capital improvements and the likes of trying to manage our campus portfolio better. A little philosophy of our preventive maintenance programs, how we initiated it, and even some best practices in that space. A little on the history first, that since I go way back when I started here in the 80s, that we did create a decentralized shop because we wanted that advantage of frequent touch points with customers. So instead of having central craft shops of 100 skilled trades, we had electrical shop, we've had a plumbing shop, control shop, and the like of that. And it was really good because they were familiarized themselves with that small cluster of buildings. And then 10 years into that, we knew that we needed to start a dedicated PM shop. And so that was a central shop with a mix of zone shops that had multiple crafts. And with the recession that hit us and with our downsizing of facilities that perhaps a lot of people have been experiencing and labor force challenges, we are back to single craft shops. And great that they get to share the knowledge, all the plumbers in the same shop, all electricians in the same shop. And but we have maintained a dedicated shop for preventive maintenance. And that's been some of our critical things on how we move forward. Some philosophical things about whether it's service calls, or do it now versus preventive maintenance. I put these in 3 buckets. And so when we started that preventive maintenance shop and that transition of moving to do the right thing, a best practice, that we had to think differently with our management staff, we had to think differently with our trades. So we tried to sensitize the group about the philosophical differences and why we're moving towards a focused preventive maintenance program. And I would certainly encourage everyone that if you're moving in that direction, you have to stage it for both management and the trades. As far as tools, equipment, and processes, we were heading in the 90s to transitioning from a DOS-based, if you're old enough, remember DOS-based CMMS system, to a Windows-based system. And of course, remember Y2K, that put us on steroids to move quickly in that direction in the late 90s. And so with that, we had electronic tools. We gave the technicians the right tools and the processes. We built processes for preventive maintenance. And perhaps the last circle is the most important, and that is we tried to maintain that stewardship role, which we're responsible to maintain the facilities the best we can. And we talked a lot about that stewardship role and how we needed to change the attitude of from going from do it now type work orders to more advanced scheduled maintenance, preventative maintenance. And that cultural piece was terribly important. And we did a lot of work on the front end. We did a lot of work, obviously, in the transition period. And it's still our focus of focusing on these 3 things about our stewardship role. So back in the day when we initialized that centralized PM program, these are some of the key steps we went through. I suspect these are consistent for others on this call that have been on that journey. And maybe you're in the middle of the journey, or maybe going to be starting that journey. But certainly these 7 steps in my mind were critical to us in how we transition. And I'll talk about these steps in more detail, but we did do the inventory, we did do tagging, we created those procedures of frequencies. The 4th one here on maintenance shops and staffing it is a really challenge, and I'll share with you more detail when I get to that one. Using our tablets were terribly important even today, saving a lot of time. I'll talk about that. And of course, if you don't measure things and check things, and checks and balances are big with our management team, with our trades, things do go astray. We'll talk about that, and then constant review. So a little more context about our buildings. We have over 150 buildings, but really 120 major buildings with over 8 million gross square feet. And more context of what is in our CMMS system, over 16,000 pieces of maintainable equipment. And most all of them obviously have some sort of scheduled maintenance attached to them. And you can certainly see the number of PM work orders issued last year, and I'll show you a slide later on that we're up to roughly 13,000 scheduled PM work orders, and it's pretty robust and growing more sophisticated every year. A little more context, we have 23 chillers across campus, over 200 air handlers, and we are a campus with a central steam district, so lots of steam traps, and we use a lot of our tagging for our steam traps. And all of our equipment is tagged with QR codes. And I'll talk a little bit more about our steam traps, whether in vaults underground or high up in a ceiling somewhere, perhaps in one of our plants, that we use RFID tags in that particular instance. So in that tagging, as you can see, we are using TMA as our CMMS system, but we did start back in the day with using barcodes, because I don't think QR codes we've been around in the late 1990s, but we did do barcodes, and we have since transitioned everything from barcodes to QR codes. And so all those pieces of equipment have a QR code on the piece of equipment. As I mentioned earlier, our steam traps that are very remote and difficult to get to, RFID is not terribly expensive, but very powerful when you don't have direct access to see the tag. And something I'd like to talk about through maybe the Q&A period is using building information modeling with our new buildings, because we do download all of the data and the assets from our BIM models for our new capital projects direct into our CMMS. And that has saved us a tremendous amount of time in populating our PM asset system. Creating task frequencies and procedures, there is a balance. And we erred early on of looking at manufacturers' manuals, I think, on the front end. And when we first launched this, we thought we knew better as management, and we got smarter where we got the trades engaged to find that balance between what the manufacturer's O&M manual said we're supposed to be doing, and using the knowledge of course, our management engineering staff. But the critical element is getting that input and buy-in from the skilled trades and trying to determine the frequency, as well as trying to determine what are those specific tasks that they need to do. And by and large, they were following O&M manuals, but yet there are certain applications and certain pieces of equipment, as you all know, that there's some give and take between what a manufacturer says and what a seasoned technician really knows what to do. And that was critical of how we created those. Staffing the PM program sounds wonderful. You just simply pull a trigger and you transition 20 people from do it now to PM. No, it's not that easy. So we transitioned over a number of years, and we got some champions on the front end. And there's always champions of whatever you start. We start our CMMS system, we have a handful of people that were champions with those tablets. We had people who loved computers and people who hated them. And so we had people who believed in PM and some people who didn't believe in PM. And so we got some champions in the front end, and we got a handful of them in year one, ramped it up year two, and by year three, we had a great transition. And of course, you have to have that transition because you can't simply stop doing those do it now work orders. So it has to happen over a period of time. And our secret sauce was transitioning over time, as well as finding champions. Staff buy-in, we started early on that and talk about the value. And we even had some technicians talk to other technicians about the value of a PM system. And it has proven itself, as I'll show you some slides of how we transition from do it now work order quantities, transition lovely into doing more PM, and there was less emergencies and less issues we had to chase our tails on. One last secret sauce was that we did have to make a shift as we shifted some of our supervisors around, and we found one supervisor who wanted to be the champion, who was going to be the PM scheduler. And so that was a significant shift also. Now, if you have the luxury with unlimited people and unlimited resources, you just hire more people and hire a PM scheduler. I don't know who can do that. So it is that transition of losing one traditional supervisor to be a PM person and shifting the focus from do it now work orders to PM work orders. And that is a really difficult challenge in how you do that, but buy-in and over time is what I recommend. Technology certainly has been part of our success story at my institution. We have many work orders, both PMs and do it now work orders. And these tablets are godsend. I mean, we have all of our drawings at our server, so a technician can not only look at the work order, but they can bring up drawings. They can order supplies through our warehouse. But for the PM piece, certainly technicians do receive the PM work orders. And by the way, those are batch loaded through our CMMS to the supervisor, and the supervisor dishes those out daily, weekly to each technician, so the technician doesn't get a whole month's worth of PM work orders and they're lost in too many of them. And yes, the technicians enter time and comments of the PMs, and that's important, and that's even terribly more important, I should say, for those technicians for do it now. We need to know what they did and what they found, and that was an issue early on of getting tech comments, but we've built that culture where the tech comments are terribly important for us. And also, a different technician might be going to that particular piece of equipment. They like to know what the last technician did. And certainly the lookup of the equipment history of the QR code, that is so cool, because the database, the CMMS, has that history. The technician can look at what they did in the past, when they did it, what parts they were in the past. What a cool feature that has been for our technicians. And our PM scheduler is not sitting in a room. They were sitting in a room quite a bit creating this thing in the first several years, but now they're, of course, creating new PMs on newer buildings and some of the tasks, but they do have time to get out and about. And so they are reviewing completed work orders, and they're looking at the comments in particular. And one of the coolest things that we found with our CMMS system that we have is searching keywords. So a technician writes follow-up. The technician says warranty. The supervisor then does some redirecting of going to a different trade, a different shop, a different person who has to do the follow-up if it's a warranty item. So using the power of that CMMS is a cool feature that we like. And again, I mentioned the PM schedule does get out of the office, behind the desk, get out in the field, talk to the technicians, see what they're doing, and double checking a few things every now and then. So I'm going to pause here for a second, and everyone take a look at this graph. And these are not made up numbers, these are real numbers. I'm pretty big on metrics, I'm very big on accuracy. And so you can see when we started our PM program in 1998, we had do it now work orders that are about 42,000 of them on our campus. And you can see the slow buildup over at least the first 3 years that we were transitioning people from do it now to PMs. And this is a classic curve. And I assumed this is the way the curve was going to show when we started in 98, but I'm still pinching myself. This did turn out just like the curves in the textbook said it would. And so you can see, of course, the PM quantities of work orders, the PM work orders rising. The do it nows, customer service was much better. The trades felt better that they were not being treated like firemen. They were being treated as professionals doing a job where they're actually going out and ahead of things, being ahead of the curve, trying to manage things in a better way. So they saw the value, we saw the value, and it played out. So then you fast forward into 2010. So we kind of hit the bottom of that curve, and I'll share with you what happened at the bottom of that curve is that you can see a little bit of those red curves going up from red bars going up in 2010 all the way through 2019, that we're transforming a lot of older buildings to new buildings, because part of this success story is not just PM, it's about capital renewal. We argued and were successful with a reasonably good capital renewal program, as well as trying to raise older buildings and eliminate our deferred maintenance challenges. So why did our red bars go up? Because we had newer equipment, newer buildings that had a lot more equipment, and yet we'd had some older buildings we were challenged with, and some of the do it now did pick up a bit. So I don't know if anyone is long in the tooth that has done something over some 20 years, and I'd just be interested to see what your charts and graphs look like. But this is my story, our story here at our institution, right on the front end, but it does, I suspect, plateau. And maybe we can let John or others weigh in on their thoughts about those that have been having PM program for a couple of decades, and does it truly plateau, or does it go down to zero? And as we get close into my time talking with this group on the best practices, we tried to layer in a few other things. So we haven't made an investment in eddy current testing for our chillers. We've invested a lot in our steam trap program, and if you have a steam traps in a central steam trap district, a steam trap program pays for itself over and over again. And I can share with you some data another day relative to how much money we've saved our institution because of the few bucks we spent and saved a bundle on our wasted steam through blow-throughs. Laser alignment, we have some of that on campus and trying to get more people engaged in that. Thermal inspection of our switchgear. We're not doing everything on campus. We're putting our toe in the water where we think it's right and making small investments. But one we spent a lot of our investment in is our BAS system, well over 150,000 points across campus. And our BAS is one of the coolest things that really have exercised a lot of trying to maintain our assets and be good stewards. And so time reminders on our BAS, and actually as I get down to the bottom of the commission, you see monitor-based commissioning. That is fully integrated with our BAS. But part of our success story on the front end of new buildings is new building commissioning. And that started about 15 years ago. And about 12 years ago, we said that was pretty cool. We went into retro commissioning. We picked several of our buildings to retro commission them and get them back in alignment. And it was about 6 or 7 years ago, we exercised our BAS with monitoring-based commissioning. And that has been one of our biggest success stories to be good stewards, using the software that we have and having the software make sure that the other software that's supposed to be turning things on and off and adjusting things is actually working appropriately. So with that, I'm going to end on that note, and I guess I'll turn it back to the person running this wonderful thing to open it up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for the discussion today, and thank you to our attendees for sending in some questions. We'll now move into the Q&A portion to address some of the questions that you have sent in, and please, we encourage you to continue sending questions in. So the first question I would like to, somebody asked is, how do you recommend migrating teams from reactive to proactive maintenance given limited staffing?
You want to jump on that, John?
Yeah, well, that's a good question because I've got some things that I've seen, but you did that transition, Pete. I'd love to hear what you have to say, how you guys did it, and then I'll throw in some 2 cents afterwards.
Sure, and I think I've answered that to a certain degree, but I'm making expand a bit on that. Obviously, it's a mindset. If you don't have a culture and of people wanting to go in that direction, I don't care who the boss is, you're not going to be successful. And so we spent some time on the front end talking about it, the rationale behind moving in that direction, why we need to move in that direction. And quite frankly, the trade said, well, how many more people are going to hire? We said none. That this is going to be beneficial to all of us, and we're going to do it over time. And so the theory behind us building that culture on the front end and conversation and getting champions that first year to see it work, show the data it's working, and then having those champions, those technicians tell other technicians, you know what, you need to get on the PM team, and I think you'll be good of doing certain things in that group. And so we use that basic psychology of having the champions bring others along with them. Now, granted, we didn't transition everybody to a PM specialist, and but you saw that graph with our success story. So culture, building the excitement on the front end, picking the right people, doing it over time. That's how we did it. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but it worked for us.
Well, you actually, you said one key thing in there that is one of the 2 ways that I have seen work, and you said a PM team, and that I have seen that be successful, just as you guys experienced, where if you've got your field of technicians, you start setting aside some of them to do PMs. And then as you make that transition, like you did over those 3 years, you probably increase the size of your PM team, where you're able to, take less of take some of your firefighters and move them over to that PM team and keep growing it so that you start getting a little bit healthier balance of where you're spreading your man hours. The other way I've seen it do, work as well is, you've got a different setup where you've maybe got a technician that's responsible for a few buildings, start setting aside certain times. So, Tuesdays and Thursday mornings are PMs. And then they slowly start adding more hours to their work week of setting aside times to do PMs. Again, it does just come down to prioritizing and making it a priority to get those PMs done and setting aside the resources to do it.
And John, I've got to add one more item that I was thinking year 3 or 4, for whatever reason, we got slammed with a lot of service calls. And I got convinced by the supervisors we needed to situationally remove people from the PM team. And that was probably the worst thing we did for 1 year, because once you start down the slippery slope, it was difficult to get back up. And so after a month or so, I saw the data and I said, you know what, we're do it now. And service calls, we were going to delay them a little bit, and we're going to stick with this PM theory. And obviously, we did stick with it. And look at the graph on the chart. And so I would counsel people to not drift. Granted, if you got a building on fire, you got everyone there. I get it. But at the end of the day, once you start drifting backwards, it's difficult to get back on that horse again.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in one more thing. Is the other thing that I've done as well is work with clients to help them manage the expectations of the customers they serve. And I've had those hard conversations that go surprisingly well with basically university faculty. It was at a college where I had one of these conversations where I let them know, hey, facilities team may not respond as quickly as you were used to in the past, but here's why. And they got it. They understood, and they were good with making that transition, because they started to see that, yeah, if we start doing the PMs, there hopefully be less times they have to call us, because less things will break.
Great. Thank you, guys. Okay, we have one other question that just came in. What are some tips to get techs to use mobile platforms?
I think Pete hit that early on, is the changing the culture. So I'll let Pete throw in some there, and I've got some tips I'll throw in on top of that.
So I'm dating myself with Palm Pilots. So
I'm with you.
And so Palm Pilot technology was pretty clunky versus these cool tablets today. And we wanted to start doing that. We only had a handful of champions back then, but when the Windows Palm Pilots, the tablets came out, it was a lot easier to get those to move forward. But and again, I started this a long time ago, and many technicians did not have computers back in the late 90s, okay? And so it was a struggle. But yet it's the younger technicians, it's the ones that want to be more advanced and use that basic psychology, gang. You got to get champions. You get someone who wants to eat that stuff up. And so there might have been certain people in the shop that loved that, and everyone else around the lunch table in the shop are looking at this person like, what are you doing? And they show them what they're doing. And so it's kind of leading a horse to water. And so having the champions, or a few of those younger ones that might be more computer savvy, and of course today everyone's computer savvy, but I think the net of the answer to that question in our space was to get those that want to do the technology, let them show their peer technicians that this is good, this is not bad, this will save you time. And actually, once we put all of our data on, all our drawings on those tablets, holy smokes, everyone wanted one because they wanted to look at the drawings. And I tell you what, you talk about that cycle time from going from building back to our records room, you talk about wasted time, window time, you talk about going to get supplies. So not only getting supplies, John, I'd say looking for the damn drawings.
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to find the O&M manuals and just, all that information. It's, I would say 10 years ago, it was a different conversation, meeting with the technicians. I know whenever we assist clients with selecting or implementing their CMMS, I want to meet with the upper management, but I want to meet with the boots in the field and get their input, find out what their challenges are, and start selling them. I call it, we're basically kind of planting some seeds of change early and get them to see the value that these mobile devices can provide. Of course, there's going to have some where you have to kind of answer that question of, well, this is, like Big Brother 1984. They just want to find some way to track us. But it's like, once you walk them through how it can help them do their job, give them the data they need at their fingertips in the field, they really are a lot more open to wanting to use the tool. And again, like 10 years ago, it was a harder sell. Today, I don't care how old they are. how old or how young they are, they're open to using the mobile devices. And with the implementations we're doing, they're excited to get their hands on them. So I agree with you, Pete. It's just a matter of getting those early adopters, getting that kind of excitement going. And, and those early adopters are good too, because they usually will have more grace with you as you work through some of the wrinkles in the initial, rollout. But showing the value that it can provide to the technicians, and the others will start hopping on board.
Whether it's you're getting a new CMMS or you're just getting some technology like these tablets, workflow is terribly important. And we found that having the technicians share what they think is the best workflow process, not what me and not what their boss thinks. And together we come together. So what is that workflow? And also, how they do things on a daily basis, how they used to do things on a daily basis, it's somewhat consistent with the technology, just speeds it up. And the other item, of course, you just don't throw software at somebody and saying, figure it out. You don't throw a tablet at a technician saying, this is good, figure it out. So quite frankly, we made significant investments, financial investments, time investments of training. And so if you're thinking that you're going to buy some tablets and everything's going to be hunky-dory tomorrow, you're wrong. That you do have to have the right kind of people, both management, our IT person. I grew from one IT person to 3. I think all of you really thinking about moving in this direction. You don't need more technicians. You might need fewer technicians, but you will be needing an IT type person on your team, and they are critical to our success. And those IT people are working daily. And trust me, one of our technicians has a problem with their tablet. The worst thing to do is get in line, see me next week, I'll fix it. That is going to turn that program upside down. So when the technician comes up to our IT person, it's drop everything, fix it, get that tool working, because I've got an expensive technician that's waiting for their tool to be fixed so they can fix the equipment. So there's an investment there, gang. And you're going to have to think smart about how you're going to shift to some more IT support and more training on the front end. And once you get some people trained, then train the trainer. And so get those champions. We've got a couple of technicians that are pretty cool, and they can teach a technician better than I can. So, but that training is something that is so darn critical. If you miss that, you missed the boat.
Yeah, well, and keeping the platform, keeping the processes simple. Like you said, Pete, a good system does not fix bad processes. So you need to take that opportunity to optimize processes. And like you said, meeting with the technicians, soliciting their feedback, and then on those mobile devices, whatever you can do to keep it quick and easy and simple. You've already done the QR codes, which to me is invaluable. Take advantage of the talk to text, incorporate drop downs, because you don't want them chicken pecking. I want them to be able to get through closing a work order, as quickly as possible, and not sit there and grumble as that takes them minutes to do it.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. We have a couple more questions. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more. How do you get contractors to use in-house systems for reporting?
Have you guys done that? Crossed that bridge there, Pete?
We outsource elevators and fire alarms, okay? And so we do not crosswalk and force our elevator company nor our fire alarm company. You will use our CMMS or else. And so we want them to use their database. However, if we get service calls, our service call system is pushed into their CMMS system, okay? And when they close it out, we close it on our end. But we do not force PMs on elevators for another company, for example, okay? So service calls goes from our system to theirs, PMs stay in theirs, but yet they have a lot of similar data, graphs, charts, data we want on our elevators that comes out of their CMMS. So there's some crosswalk that works well between the data and the reporting that comes out of ours or theirs.
Yeah, for those that want to get the contractors involved, you've got to be selective as to which contractor that you engage. I mean, a lot of times when I've seen this happen, it usually is more like with your HVAC contractor, because because HVAC has a higher frequency of maintenance, and so they're going to be out on your site more frequently. Getting it baked into the contract, the service contract, when it comes up for renewal, that's saying, hey, you will complete work orders and attach invoices, things like that into the mobile platform. But the other thing you need to take into consideration when you say, okay, let's pick on your HVAC contractor, is do they tend to send the same technicians or do they have a higher turnover? Because if it's the same technicians, it's a pretty easy thing to do. But if they have a higher turnover and you just don't know which person's showing up that week, that becomes a problem. So you'd have to have those discussions with your contractor to try to get some sort of consistency in who's coming to site and getting that work executed.
That is a good question. For those that do more outsourcing, we're insourcing most, as I mentioned. But I'll give you one other cool thing, and that's warranty work orders. We've got 2 or 3 capital projects going on all the time on our campus. And so we use our CMMS system to track warranty issues. And we do a daily push out to our construction manager, and they push it out, of course, each of the subs to follow up on warranty stuff. So they are doing our work orders, warranty work orders on our system.
Yep, that's a great idea. And you should get that basically prompt if something's under warranty, if you go to put a work order against that asset.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I believe we have time for one last question. Are there a few FMS applications that would be suggested for a national presence of single facilities with a skeleton facility group of 3?
It's right in your wheelhouse, John.
So they're asking, I'm just trying to get clarification on the question. They're looking for a system that would be useful to do something like that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. A lot of it's going to come down to when I work with my clients, there's a lot of good products out there. There's some products out there that, frankly, you probably just need to stay away from. But it really comes down to what do you need the tool to do? Because these CMMS systems, they are business tools. And you as a facility manager director, you're a business manager managing the second largest asset and expense for your organization, more than likely. So what I encourage my clients to do is don't go shopping first, because it's easy to get sucked into a good sales presentation, and it may be a great product, but it's not the right product for you. So I think that's always important, is to have that conversation to figure out what do you need the system to do. And then once you define what those requirements are, then you go shopping and you pick the right tool that's going to work for you now, and also it's going to grow and evolve with you as you continue to grow and evolve your program.
I would agree, John, that any one of these CMMS systems doesn't fit every one of your needs. So as John mentioned, get your shopping list of what you really need, and then prioritize that list, and you'll find out this system is not hitting my number 1 and number 2 need. And early on, I was looking at something that I wanted to make sure we were tracking costs, because I want to make sure our CMMS goes into our university-wide billing system, and all of them could do that. And so that was a high need. Might not be high need for someone else. So John's counsel to everyone listening is terribly important. Get your list together, and then work the list to see who can meet your high priorities.
Yeah, and I don't want to burst any bubbles, but there is no one system that does everything well. It doesn't exist. I don't care what the salespeople tell you. It doesn't exist yet. We keep hoping for it and waiting for it. And so it may come down to space management. So, something like an IWMS, integrated work management system, versus a CMMS, where it's, a little bit more hardy on the asset and maintenance management side. You've got some of those software products that say, oh, well, yeah, we do space management and we do maintenance management. They're going to be thin on one of the 2 of those. They just don't do both well. So I think that's, again, like Pete said, prioritizing what your needs are. And if it comes down to it, I've got many clients that they've got a space management software and they have a CMMS. So they're using the best of breed for both of those products.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your talk today. It looks like we are just about nearing the end of time. If your question was not answered, we'll forward it to our speakers to address offline. Thank you again to gentlemen for speaking today and to TMA Systems for sponsoring this webinar. And thank you to our audience for attending today. A recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com. Thank you and have a great afternoon, everyone.